Elias Mercer was 43 years old, a trauma surgeon who had spent 20 years putting people back together with hands that never shook, even when everything around him did. He drove a gray sedan he'd had for 9 years and parked it in the far lot so the closer spots stayed open for families. He wore the same worn ID lanyard he'd been issued his first week, because replacing it had never seemed worth the trouble. That Friday, a hospital administrator stood in the corridor outside the ICU and fired him on the spot, in front of the night staff, 3 hours after he had pulled her own son back from the edge of death. She did not know whose name was on the deed to the building she was standing in. She was about to find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The ICU never slept. Monitors beeped in steady rhythms down the dim corridor, and the floor smelled of antiseptic and the particular cold of a building that ran all night. Elias had been there since the night before. He had a way of standing very still in a crisis, the way some men go loud and some go quiet, and he was one of the quiet ones. The nurses had learned over the years that when Dr. Mercer got calm, it meant things were bad, and that calm was the thing to hold on to. He was the kind of man who finished what he started. He never left a patient's chart for the next shift to clean up. He checked on the families in the waiting room himself, even when there was someone whose job that technically was. He knew the names of the cleaning staff and the cafeteria cooks and the man who fixed the elevators, and he asked after their kids, and he remembered the answers. That night, a 14-year-old boy had come in after a car wreck, internal bleeding, a pressure that kept dropping no matter what they hung. Elias had operated for 6 hours. At one point, the room had gone quiet in the wrong way, the way it does when the numbers stop arguing back. And Elias had kept working through that quiet, steady, certain, until the numbers came back and started arguing again. The boy lived. By 4 a.m, he was stable in the ICU, and Elias had gone out to the waiting room to find the mother. He did not know yet that the mother was someone he already worked under. He did not know that the gratitude on her face in that waiting room would last exactly as long as it took her to learn his name. Her name was Vanessa Cole, and she was the hospital's chief administrator. She had been in the role 11 months. She had come in from the corporate side, from a chain that measured a hospital the way you'd measure a warehouse, and she had spent her first year there cutting things she did not understand. She had a way of speaking that sounded like listening and wasn't. She kept a list of names, the doctors she considered problems, the ones who pushed back when she trimmed a budget, who insisted on the extra scan, who would not discharge a patient a day early to free a bed. Elias Mercer was at the top of that list, and she did not know his face. That was the strange shape of it. She had fought with him for 11 months through memos and meetings, through a deputy who carried her decisions to the floor, but she had never once stood in a room with him. To her, Dr. Mercer was a signature on too many objections, a cost center who would not stay inside his numbers. She had been looking for a reason to remove him since spring. What she did not know, standing in that waiting room at 4 a.m. while a surgeon told her that her son would live, was that she had spent 11 months at war with the one person in the building she could not touch. 3 years before any of this, the hospital had nearly closed. It was an old building in an old part of the city, the kind of place that served people the bigger systems had stopped finding profitable. The board had been ready to sell it to a chain that would have gutted it, turned the trauma center into an urgent care, and moved the real medicine to the suburbs. The neighborhood would have lost the only emergency room within 9 miles. Elias had grown up 4 blocks from that emergency room. His mother had been carried through its doors more than once. He knew exactly what it meant to the people around it, the way only someone who had needed it as a child could know. So he had done something almost no one in the building was aware of. Over 2 decades, he had invested carefully, quietly, the way he did everything, taking nothing flashy, living well below what a surgeon could, parking the same 9-year-old sedan in the same far lot year after year. When the sale came up, he had been in a position to do something about it. He had bought the hospital, not as a trophy, as a repair. He had done it through a trust so that his name stayed off the lobby and out of the press, because he did not want to be the surgeon who owned the place. He wanted to be the surgeon. The two things did not mix well on a floor, and he knew it. A man whose orders could not be questioned was a man whose mistakes could not be caught. And Elias had seen enough careers curdle that way to want no part of it. So he had hired a board to run the business of it and asked them for exactly one thing: keep the doors open to the neighborhood, no matter what the math said. He took no salary from the ownership. He drew his surgeon's pay like everyone else and put the rest back into the building, into a new pediatric bay, into loan forgiveness for nurses who'd trained there and stayed. He had operated the next morning as if nothing had changed, because to him, almost nothing had. He scrubbed in. He took call. He parked in the far lot. The cleaning staff still didn't know. Most of the board had never met him in person. He liked it that way. The only person on the floor who knew was an old charge nurse named Dolores Reyes, 66, small, straight-backed, silver hair pinned tight, who had been at that hospital longer than Elias had been alive, and who had figured it out the way she figured everything out, by paying attention. She had never said a word, not because she didn't know, because she understood why he wanted it kept. And she respected a man who could own a thing and still carry his own trays. That was what Vanessa Cole had never understood about the building she thought she ran, until the morning she decided to make an example of the wrong man. The corridor outside the ICU was bright and cold, fluorescent light flat against the waxed floor, the early shift just coming on. It happened over a chart. The boy, her son, was stable but not out of danger, and Elias had written orders to keep him another 72 hours, with a repeat scan and a specialist consult that the budget flagged as expensive. A junior administrator, following the cost protocols Vanessa had installed, had queried the orders. Word had gone up the chain, and Vanessa, running on no sleep and the particular shame of a powerful person who has just had to be afraid like everyone else, had come down to the floor to assert control over the one thing she could control. She did not recognize him. That was the thing that would haunt her later. She had stood beside this man at 4 a.m. and let him tell her that her son would live. And 3 hours later, with his name now in front of her on a chart she'd come to dispute, she did not connect the two. "You're Mercer," she said. Not a question. "I am," Elias said. "You've been a problem since before I got here." She had the chart in her hand. "These orders are exactly the kind of thing we've been trying to correct. A 72-hour hold, a repeat scan, a consult we don't need. You don't get to spend this hospital's money like it's yours." Elias looked at her. He did not say the obvious thing. He did not say it because saying it would have made it about him. And the boy 2 doors down was still the only thing in that corridor that mattered. "The scan is for a kid who's still bleeding somewhere we haven't found," he said. "I'd like to find it before he leaves." "I've reviewed the case," she said, which was not true, and they both knew it. "He's stable. He can be stepped down today. And you?" She looked at the night staff gathered at the station, making sure they were watching, because the point of this was that they watch. "You are done here. As of now, I want your access revoked, and I want you off this floor." The corridor went still. One of the nurses started to say something and stopped. Elias did not raise his voice. He did not point out that the patient was her own son, which she had not mentioned to the staff and clearly did not want mentioned. He did not throw the chart. He set it down on the counter, squared it gently against the edge, the way he set down every instrument he'd ever held. He noticed, the way he noticed things, that her hands were shaking, not with anger, with the aftershock of a mother who had almost lost a child and had no other way left to feel in control. He filed that away without deciding yet what to do with it. He did not let it change what came next, but he did not forget it either. "All right," he said. That was all. 2 words. He took off the worn lanyard, set it on the counter beside the chart, and walked toward the elevator. He did not look back at her. He looked forward, toward the doors, toward the boys' room as he passed it, where through the glass he could see the small, steady rise and fall of a chest he had spent 6 hours keeping in motion. He didn't move fast. That was the part she would never have been able to predict. He went home. He slept 4 hours, which was more than he'd had in 2 days. And then he made one phone call, not to a lawyer, not to the press, but to Dolores Reyes, who picked up on the second ring. "I heard," she said. "The whole floor heard. How's the boy?" "Still here. Still scheduled for step down at noon, on her orders. The night team's sick about it. They don't want to move him." She paused. "Neither do I. There's something the scan would catch, and we both know it." "Don't move him yet," Elias said. "Give me until 10. He did not spend that morning building a case for revenge. He spent it the way he'd have spent it for any patient. He called the chair of his own board, a retired judge named Harold Wynn, who had agreed 3 years ago to keep the doors open and ask few questions. He told him, plainly, without heat, what had happened on the floor. He told him about the scan and the hold and a boy who was about to be stepped down for a budget line. He laid it out the way he laid out a case at the table before a hard surgery, not the part that had been done to him, but the problem in front of them, in order. The order that was clinically right, the order that had been canceled, the patient who would pay for the gap between the two. He left himself out of it almost entirely, and Harold noticed that, the way he noticed everything, and understood what it meant. "She doesn't know," Harold said. It was not really a question. "No. You want her gone?" Elias was quiet for a moment. He thought about her hands shaking in the corridor, the aftershock of a mother who had nearly lost a child. He had spent 20 years watching fear do strange things to people in this building. He was not in the habit of mistaking it for malice, even when it wore Malice's clothes. "I want the boy to get his scan," he said. "And I want it to be impossible for this to happen to the next doctor who's right, the one who doesn't happen to own the building. Whatever that takes." Harold understood the distinction. It was the difference between a man who wanted to win and a man who wanted a thing fixed. He had spent 40 years on a bench learning to tell them apart, and he had met very few of the second kind. "The board can meet at 10, Harold said. "Be there." Down on the floor, Vanessa Cole was having a strange morning. The step-down she had ordered kept not happening. The nurses were slow in a way she couldn't quite cite. The junior administrator who had escalated the chart had gone quiet and would not meet her eye. And her own son, when she sat with him, asked her where the doctor was, the calm one, the one who'd been there when he woke up, because he wanted to thank him. She told him the doctor was busy. She did not yet feel the floor moving under her. She thought this was already over. Elias arrived at the boardroom 10 minutes early. He always did. It was on the 4th floor, a plain room with a long table and a window that looked out over the old neighborhood, the rooftops he'd grown up under, The board was already assembling, quietly, the way people gather when they understand something has shifted. Dolores Reyes was there too, which surprised some of them, seated near the door with a folder in her lap. Vanessa was sent for. She came up expecting a meeting about budgets, the kind she ran every week, and she walked in with the confidence of someone who believed the room was already hers. She had a folder of her own, the cost reports, the case for trimming exactly the sort of order Mercer had written. She glanced at the man sitting at the far end of the table, the surgeon she'd fired 3 hours of sleep ago, and her first thought was that someone had let him stay to make a scene. "Before we begin," Harold Wynn said, "I want to be precise about why we're here. Mrs. Cole, you terminated a member of the medical staff on the floor this morning. I want to walk through that decision." "I did," Vanessa said, "and I'll stand behind it. Dr. Mercer has been the single most expensive." "His orders," Harold said, not unkindly. He slid a single page down the table. "The hold and the scan you canceled. We had them reviewed an hour ago by the chief of the department. Would you read his note?" She looked at it. The note was short. It said that the canceled scan was clinically indicated, that the patient showed signs consistent with an unidentified slow bleed, and that stepping him down on schedule would have been, in the reviewer's words, dangerous. Something moved across Vanessa's face. It was not fear yet. It was the look of a person who has built something and just felt it shift under her. "The scan has since been performed," Harold continued, "on the instruction of this board an hour ago." He paused. "It found the bleed. The boy is back in surgery now. He's going to be fine. He would very likely not have been, had your order been carried out." The room was quiet in a way that was different from polite silence. "I didn't have all the—" Vanessa started. "No," Harold agreed. "You didn't. That's the part we need to discuss. Because the doctor who wrote those orders, the one you removed in front of his staff for spending this hospital's money." He stopped, and he looked down the table at Elias, and he let the silence do the last of it. It was Dolores who finally spoke. From her seat by the door, in the even voice of a woman who had waited a long time to say a true thing. "He's not spending the hospital's money, Mrs. Cole," she said. "He's spending his own. He owns this building. He has for 3 years. He just never wanted any of us to treat him different for it." Vanessa's expression went through several things in 2 seconds. Recognition, confusion, understanding. And then the specific stillness of a person watching the floor open beneath the thing she'd been standing on. Elias stood. He did not gather his papers, because he hadn't brought any. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at her, and when he spoke it was quiet, and it was meant for her and not for the room. "I didn't keep it quiet so I could hold it over anyone," he said. "I kept it quiet so I'd find out how people treated a doctor they thought they could throw away." He paused at the edge of the table. "You found out something about yourself this morning. So did I. Use it better than you use this." He walked out without looking back. He went down to the second floor, scrubbed in, and joined the team working on the boy. It did not happen all at once. Vanessa Cole was not marched out of the building. That was not how Elias wanted it, and it was not what happened. The board suspended her pending review, and over the following weeks, the review found what reviews of that kind tend to find. A pattern, the list of names, the doctors trimmed for being right, the beds emptied a day too early. She was offered a quiet resignation rather than a public dismissal, which was more grace than she had shown anyone, and she took it. She left the way people leave when they are carrying something they cannot set down. Not dramatically, just constantly. Her son recovered fully. The second surgery found the bleed exactly where Elias's scan order said to look. The boy, when he was well enough to walk the floor, came looking for the calm doctor to thank him, and found him in the far stairwell eating a sandwich between cases, and sat with him a while. Elias never told the boy what had happened upstairs. It would not have helped him to carry it. Elias kept operating. He did not take the administrator's office, did not move to the fourth floor, did not let his name go up in the lobby even then. The board put new rules in place, the ones he'd asked Harold for, so that no order written for a patient's safety could be canceled by someone who had never examined the patient. He thought that was the only part of the morning worth keeping. Dolores Reyes retired that spring after 41 years. On her last day, Elias carried her box of things down to her car himself, the way she had once watched him carry his own trays, and neither of them said much, because they didn't need to. On a cold evening, the following December, almost a year after the morning in the corridor, Elias walked the quiet ICU at the end of a long shift. The monitors beeped in their steady rhythms. The floor smelled of antiseptic and the particular cold of a building that ran all night. Through the windows, the lights of the old neighborhood spread out below. The rooftops he'd grown up under, the emergency room doors still open 9 miles from anywhere else that was. He stopped at the station, where his replacement lanyard hung on a hook, still new, still stiff. He'd never quite gotten around to wearing it. He picked up a chart instead, checked an order, set it down squared against the edge of the counter. Then he went to check on the families in the waiting room himself, the way he always had, because that part had never been anyone's job but the one he'd given himself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.